Welcome to Big Blend Radio, where we celebrate variety and how it adds spice to quality of life. Welcome, everyone. It is the end of March, at the end of Women's History Month, and today we're going to close off that month of programming. But you know, we talk about women's history pretty much every day on Big Blend Radio. We've got Maura Casey joining us. She is a journalist and award-winning writer, and her debut memoir comes out tomorrow, April 1st. Comes out after the April Fool's Day part, right?
Yes,
It is called Saving Ellen. And I encourage you to go to her website, caseyinc.com. You can also find her on Substack. So welcome, Maura. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you. And Casey Inc. is INK. That mixes people up sometimes. I am not a corporation, however.
Oh, okay. That's right. To me, it just made sense. But
No, right, exactly.
And it's CASEY for Casey. Let's do that too.
You wouldn't believe how many people mess up a simple name like Casey. It's amazing, but it happens.
Well, Lisa's Liza, Lisa, Liz. It's Elizabeth sometimes.
There you go.
And I'm like, no, I am the Mona Lisa. Just get it straight all. No. Well, Saving Ellen, this memoir really, you talk about your sister, your family, your father, your mother. Your sister really went through a lot in regards to kidney disease. And this is going back into Buffalo, New York, where you're from. And I know my mom went through some kidney issues in the same time frame, and they locked her up in her room for a whole year without letting her have light reading. She had to lie on her back in the dark for a year as a school kid.
Wow.
And
how did you manage that?
Well, to this day, she passes out if there's anything to do with needles, because it was the doctor would come to the house, and doctors are not good at taking blood.
Right.
And so she would teach herself to faint when he came to the house.
Mm-hmm.
And then when everybody was out of the house, and there were 6 kids, so you understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And when everybody was out the house, she got up and ran around and went crazy with all the dogs outside, and she was totally fine. This was in the era when scarlet fever went around, and she had nephritis, and her mom put her in with the rest of the kids that had scarlet fever so that they would all get it at once and get over it.
Oh,
and
boy.
We've changed in medicine, haven't
there's
we?
An approach, right?
Yeah, don't start.
Yeah.
It's an interesting family.
Yeah, I'll say.
Yeah, so I know she's going to enjoy reading your memoir too, because there's a lot of tie-ins there, even with your father. That's
Yes.
What characters?
Well, I think if you get a big Irish family, you naturally have characters. There's a lot of humor and a lot of dark humor, and there's generally a bottle or two thrown in the mix. My father in my book is sort of a little synopsis in a nutshell. Essentially, my sister, who was the 5th of 6 kids, I was the youngest of 6, became ill with kidney disease around the middle 60s when the disease was considered terminal. Now kidney transplants are looked upon like getting your wisdom teeth taken out, but then it was the medical equivalent of walking on the moon. So she gets kidney disease. My father sort of dissolved into alcoholism. My mother, who was a World War II veteran and a wisecracking,
she's amazing,
strong, and funny, just said, we're going to save Ellen. Whatever it takes is going to save Ellen. And she did, by several years later, giving her own kidney to save Ellen. But in so doing, there was a lot that she kept from us. There's a lot of decisions she made that had repercussions. And so I had to write this book to figure it all out, finally.
Wow. So it's like your own family mystery.
Yes, it was. And we all kind of guessed, and we were pretty close. But it was a real eye-opening experience tracking down Mary Hawking, who was Ellen's doctor and who is the sister of Stephen Hawking. She was working on a residency and a fellowship in Buffalo for 3 years. And she was wonderful. She was wonderful and young and brilliant. And I walked her dog every day. She needed a dog walker. I walked her dog. And, reconnecting with her was one of the gifts of the book. I sent an email to her brother's foundation saying I was looking for Mary Hawking. within 5 or 6 hours, I got back an email with a subject line saying, "How lovely to hear from you."
Mm.
And so we reconnected, and she remembered everything. She remembered Ellen's case. She still had, because her parents saved everything, she had all the letters she wrote from Buffalo. So I was able to unravel a lot of it. And along
Wow.
the way, I had kept diaries as a kid, and I had never read them over again, but during COVID there wasn't a lot to do. So I began to read them and was stunned to find that they had pages and pages of dialogue, scenes. I wrote down all the crazy funny things my mother used to say, and was able to see that in the midst of my teenage angst, I was still a kind of a baby journalist. I mean, I went into the
Oh, cool.
profession. So that's the story of the book.
Wow, wow. Well, I think also when you're around, well, look, I think the Irish have always had a gift of storytelling and humor,
I
honestly, but storytelling is part of it. It's part of getting through things.
Yes.
Is spinning the yarn, it really is. And
Yeah,
so getting into journalism as a young person, I mean, writing a journal, a lot of times it's our way to get through things, is to get it
exactly.
out. It's your own private little spot.
And there has been research that my husband's kind of a wonk, and as I mentioned before the show, he was a therapist, and he said there is actual research saying that if you journal through hard times, it helps a lot. And it
Mm,
helped me. I didn't know I was applying therapy to myself, but I was, in essence, in exploring everything and who I was and what I wanted to be and what was happening. I was going through stages of recovery that I
mm.
wasn't even aware of.
Wow. Now, as a family unit, when one is sick and terminal at that point, right? That's how everyone's looking, at that kind of at kidney disease, right?
Right.
Then all eyes are on Ellen, and of course, there's love, even in a family that has some dysfunction, right? There's still love, right? And unity, which is a very interesting thing to have bonding at the same time as maybe not all the time. So how was that dynamic to balance out as a young person? I'm sure writing helped that, but going back in everything now and just revisiting it, can you see the unity and then also maybe some just a different dynamic when all eyes are on Ellen at that point?
Well, all eyes were on Ellen, but my brothers and sisters didn't know she was terminal. I did
Mm,
because I walked in on my mother within a half hour of when our family doctor said to her, "Look, she's not going to live to adulthood, so be
wow.
glad you have other children." And she was so stunned. I was 10 years old, walked in, and she blurted it out and then felt horrible that
Mm,
she had said anything. And as far as I know, no one else knew. I knew, my mother knew, maybe my father knew. I don't know what they talked to each other. I know my mother filtered medical information. But so they just knew she was very, very, very sick and going in and out of the hospital. And I think everybody reacted in their own way. My brother Seamus tried to be the protector. My brother
mm,
Tim kind of withdrew. My sister Claudia, as the oldest girl, wanted to protect all of us. And so there was all this stuff happening, but really when it comes down to Ellen was the center of the family around which we all revolved. If she had a good day, our days were better. If she was having a bad day, our day was not going to be as good.
mm.
And so that dynamic in a family just screams, you all need family therapy, but it wasn't really done then.
Oh my gosh, it's hush hush. It's
Uh,
still in the hush hush time.
oh yeah, and like now now there's much more openness and there's much more willingness to say maybe we should all talk about it as a family, but then it just didn't happen. We just made jokes, you know?
Yeah, now, yeah, it's you make jokes exactly. I remember being in a wildfire, and
Oh,
it was like we went through a series of them, major evacuations back to back to back to back, and that's how I learned what PTSD was. After you don't
wow.
sleep for a year, you start to get a little wonky. But we
Yes.
were actually on our way home after an evacuation thinking it was safe, and then another fire popped up. And this was closer to our home than planned. And so we go hauling through, and the cops weren't letting people into our neighborhood. And we're like, um, hello, no, it wasn't that polite. And we went by the car, just drove past them. I'm like, were you going to shoot us going to our house? So off we go. And we had a friend with us. And it was the first time the gas station had opened this day. And everybody thought everything was safe, but it had started up. And we were able to get gas, which is a big deal when wildfires come. Half the time, electricity's gone, no gas. And I remember there was beer in the refrigerator at the gas station. We all looked at each other like, we haven't had a beer for like how long? Let's get some beer and celebrate. So we're in my pickup truck with all our stuff and file cabinets, because that's what we had back in those days. And so off we go to go and unload, and this fire breaks out, and now we're like, holy cow. We get to the house, and it really is close. We get out of the pickup truck, and we all looked at each other. We all took a beer, and we were now like, we better hose down the house and all of this stuff. But it was just this 5 to maybe not even a full minute. We each did a beer commercial. We held a beer. We're like, take time for a cool one. When the wildfire's coming, take time. And we started doing this whole song and dance, all three of us. And then we're like, what are we doing? The fire's right. But it's like you had to get it out in some way. I don't even
It's
think we drank
released.
it. Yeah, it was, and then we had to hose. The house didn't burn down though, which was good.
Thankfully.
But I'll never, and I think I've shared this story quite a few times, because humor balances you out,
Yes.
you
Yes.
know?
And I forgot half the stuff my mother said. And so I would be reading, the things as a 15-year-old I wrote, and I'd be laughing like, and she turned to us at the dinner table and said, if I didn't have you damn kids holding me back, I'd be a high-class streetwalker in Miami by now. Things like that. Or she would, if we didn't like the dinner, she'd say, oh, it's not up to your standards, go to another
Yeah.
hotel.
Yeah, right. It's fun.
So,
Yeah.
but it was constant, and I only wrote down a little bit of it, but I felt in the end very grateful to my teenage self for
Mm,
channeling my mother's voice, so I could hear her again.
mm. Now let's go to Mary Hawking, because I
Yes.
wonder about people realizing his family, his sister going off and being a doctor, and at that time too, young female doctors were still in the beginnings of becoming female doctors too, right?
It was very unusual. So I kind of idolized Mary, and she was the kind of doctor, she was, in her late 20s, and she was not afraid to be close to her patients. One other patient, Ricky Rodriguez, who was also a kidney patient, his mother would cut Mary's hair, and I walked her dog, and she was, very happy to get to know us on a personal level. And eventually, we were inviting her to the cottage on the island that I wrote about in the book on Lake Ontario, and she'd come there, and we had really good memories of her. And she
Mm,
was very, very kind, very, very compassionate. And she was exactly the same when I got to know her again through the wisdom, the wonder of computers. We would talk on Skype and would have these long conversations. And she looked almost exactly the same, except a little older, as her brother's beautiful blue-gray eyes. It was like we were time machines for the other. The one thing she wanted to know is what happened to her dog, because she couldn't take Braun, who was a
oh,
gigantic German Shepherd, huge. I can't believe I could even walk this dog. She couldn't take him back to England because they had such strict quarantine laws. He would have to be
oh,
in a kennel for 6 months. And
oh
I didn't
no.
want to do that to him. So my mother arranged that Braun would go to a family with a couple of teenage boys. So I still knew the family. I said, what happened to Braun? Mary wants to know. And they said, he died of old age and he had lots of room to roam. We had acres and acres of land. Everybody adored him and he lived a great life. So that put her mind at ease because she always worried about that a little bit.
Yeah, you do. You do. I mean, it's losing a pet and not being there for their end.
Right.
You always have them like wondering what's going on, but that just shows her compassion too,
Yes.
as a doctor, you
Yeah,
know.
she was terrific, and she
So
explained
she's
to
a
me.
woman making history.
Right, absolutely. And she explained to me everything she remembered, the medications Ellen was on, and
Mm.
the dosage of steroids, which were massive,
See,
massive.
that's what happened to my grandfather. My mom's father was, he got emphysema and all these different things from working in factories, and they gave him. He was on like so many narcotics, like 20 different, and steroids. And this was a person who could barely breathe and walk, was able to pick up a couch, yell at everybody, and throw it across the room, which
Yes,
was insane. And I
it's
think it was
crazy.
prednisone that was doing half of the damage.
Ellen was on prednisone and Imuran.
Oh.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. But although it had a lot of side effects which were not good for
Mm,
Ellen, the state of the art to keep someone from rejecting just 7 years before was
mm.
exposing them to full body radiation.
Wow.
That's how primitive, relatively, from our vantage point, the treatment was in those days. And
Mm.
steroids were seen as a great step forward.
Now that I mean, I'm seeing, we pet sit as we travel, and I mean, prednisone is like half the dogs have it for different things, and you're just
Right.
like, and my
They give
mom goes
the cat.
berserk. My
Right,
mom
exactly.
goes berserk. She's like, you can't give everyone prednisone. But
Right.
I'm like, it's the dosage has changed. But wouldn't you also see that your sister and your mom donating her kidney, that is making history in that, because gosh, that's scary, you know?
I had to do some real digging to figure out how rare the kidney transplant was in 1970, because on the internet, the statistics stop at 1988. So on eBay, I found a book of medical statistics that explained to me that that year there was about 1,217 transplants across the United States, that there is 400 living donor kidney transplants, and my mother was one of that 400. Now, to put this in
Wow.
perspective, there's like 20,000 transplants a year, and there has been since the beginning, since the 1960s, well over 600,000 transplants. So Ellen was in the first about 3,000 transplants to happen in the United States.
Wow.
So
Wow. And then your mom being the one to do it.
my mom was the one to do it, and what we did, we all had our blood tested to see, and then what they wanted to know is you had to have the same blood type. Ellen was O positive, mom was O positive. My brother Seamus, my sister Claudia, they were O positive, and my mother made sure she marshaled all the facts as to eliminate any of her children from donating. She wanted to be the one to do it. And as a mother, I can understand that.
Yeah.
But with Seamus, she said, nope, it'll interfere with sports, which was like, really interfere with rowing? It's not like he was in football.
Mm.
With Claudia, she said, nope. If she wants to have children, it will complicate having children. And Mary Hawking said, that's not true. So she marshaled everything and filtered any medical information to make it as if she were the obvious ones. And the doctors didn't want to do it. They didn't want to
Mm.
do it because, she was 48. She had been a smoker. She,
Mm.
she had to have part of a lung taken out at one point. I mean,
Oh,
like, she wasn't the A1 candidate. But she finally got them to agree, and she was the one who donated. And they didn't think it would last 5 years, but it lasted 20 years. It lasted 20
wow.
years. It was a long time. So,
Wow.
especially way back when.
Wow. When you think about it, I mean, it's fascinating what medicine, the changes and I mean, how it gets better. Sometimes it gets worse before it gets better, and the system is not easy. So, what about that part of going through as caretakers? Because it is so difficult to be a caretaker. And I think that's something that families go through all over the world, obviously, right? For millennia,
Right.
we've been taking care of each other, but it is sometimes harder on the caretaker than the patient at times.
When somebody has a chronic illness in the family, everybody has PTSD. I mean, everyone
Yeah.
is suffering from a sort of a daily trauma, whether it's excruciating or not.
Mm,
Some level of trauma is being experienced. Ellen helped
yeah.
because she made the decision early on that she wasn't going to complain. She was not going to complain about all this, and she was going to try and be brave. And that was wonderful and courageous, but it also made me feel like no matter what I went through, it wasn't going to be important enough to bring up
Yeah.
because my life wasn't at stake. I might have had a bad day at school, but really, do I have permission to bring that up when it's not life-threatening? And so there's a funny dynamic that happens
Mm,
that when a person at the center of the family is ill, the others maybe feel like nothing they do is important
mm,
enough to bring to the family's attention. And so
mm.
that can be a struggle.
That's hard, and that's probably part of you going to writing your diaries.
Right. Because an empty page, always listens. An
Yeah.
empty page will always listen to you. And years later, when my father got sick, my sister Ellen said to me, I never knew how hard it would be being on the other side of the hospital bed. And I never understood what you guys went through with me being sick all the time. And this is just the hardest thing I've ever done. I would much rather be sick than have this.
Wow.
So
Wow.
it's a reality.
Yeah, and it's hard. Well, well, this is again humor,
Yes,
right? But then the stress of things that can lead to dysfunction. And,
yes.
I keep using the word crazy and I shouldn't use that word, but I do.
Well, eventually
But
I began to drink when I was
mm,
13, and what helped my decision to, well, first of all, my brother introduced me to beer, but in our family, alcohol was the ninth member of the family. I mean,
mm,
alcohol was beloved, alcohol was celebrated, alcohol was present at every grief and there to celebrate every triumph. And
mm,
the prevailing attitude at the time was, well, if kids learn to drink at home, they'll learn to handle it. They will somehow
mhm,
be better able to manage the upside or the downside, which is insane. I mean, that's not true. And research shows that the earlier you start drinking, the more likely it is you will have problems as an adult, which I did, which is why I
mm,
stopped drinking when I was 28.
mm,
But that became a coping mechanism for me.
mm.
And I thought booze was just the most wonderful thing ever.
Yeah. It's a numbing. It's a it, it's a numbing thing, even though
Right.
you then if the next morning you don't feel so happy, and then it's like, oh, have some more. It'll numb it
Right, and it well, and it also all of my problems would disappear in a puffy pink cloud once I
again.
started to imbibe. And
Yeah.
there was no adult in my house at the time who said, "No, you're not going to do that. Have some
Mm,
lemonade, have a
yeah.
glass of milk, but you're not going to drink a beer." So,
Yeah. Well, I grew up in that culture in South Africa. It was very much that way. Kids
mhm,
could have wine at the table if you went out to dinner at a restaurant, and you were like 16, even 14, 15, 16, and your parents were there, or you had like an adult supervisor, you could have a glass of wine at your dinner. It was kind of that way.
wow,
But that whole country, man, they party. It's a
I'll bet.
serious drinking, it's certain groups of people like to do it, like you're saying, the Irish, the South Africans, Australians are right there at that time. It may have all changed by now, but and the world is changing. Look at everyone
Right,
doing mocktails, and I think the younger generation now looks and goes, no, I don't need to do, what my family did. I don't need
right.
that. So we've changed. I mean, musicians are drinking smoothies before they go on stage instead of shooting up. So.
Well, and it's a great change. When I
Yeah.
stopped drinking, my husband and I had bought a tumble down house that hadn't been
Mm.
painted in 30 years, and we didn't have any money, so we were scraping and listening to ball games on the radio, and I was just dying for a beer. So finally, one day, my husband brings home, I think it was Budweiser NA. It was the only non-alcoholic beer on the market, and I was like, what is this? But it quenched not just my thirst, but it eliminated it was almost like an itch, almost like I had
Yeah.
mosquito bites. It was just irritating not to drink. And a non-alcoholic beer really helped me. Now there's like 30 on the market. I've got a liquor store near me that there's 14 different non-alcoholic beers. It's fantastic.
Non-alcoholic wine.
Right. So, it's a great change and it's socially acceptable, which is wasn't then. I think I was ashamed of not drinking for about 10 years.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Well,
Yeah.
before I just felt like, well, I screwed up, but it took me 10 years to realize,
Oh,
no, you didn't screw up. You did something really important. You broke a
yeah.
chain of dysfunction.
Yeah. Okay, so when you go like through that and then it's like, oh, why is she having to not drink? That kind
Right.
of look
You're
down.
mentally ill. Why can't you drink? And I just look at people and say, I'm a drunk. I don't do that. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
really, really open about it because I don't care what people think. It's a
Yeah, well, you have
gift
to
of
get through
getting
that.
older.
Well, and that that kind of feeling also is connected with what you're talking about being the caretaker and not being able to have that venting place of having a bad day or, you know, not having that because we have to vent. We have to let the negative out
Right.
because everyone's negative is different. It's like I may see a wildfire now and be a little bit more nervous than somebody else because I've been through so many. And at the same time, maybe not as nervous, just as everyone's different
Right.
in
And
how they
the
take
way they
things.
metabolize this is different.
Yeah, yeah. So that feeling is, and it ties into also you going through sexual assault, having been in that, and I don't want to use the word victim, but when you are in that position, you are, and then it's how to pull out of that because that also, especially when you're young, it just is like, what have I done wrong for that? A lot of women have
Right.
that feeling.
Right. And I was 12 and it was basically a stranger
Mhm.
jumping out of the bushes. And
Wow.
it was very traumatic. I almost didn't know
Sure.
what was happening.
Right.
And but I knew it was really, really bad, really bad. And it upended the family for a few days. And we went to the police and I went to the hospital and all that kind of thing. But what made me really uncomfortable is now I was creating a problem that was making everybody upset. And I realized how Ellen must have felt all these years as having a condition that was constantly making everybody upset. And so I quickly tried to pivot to pretending like it was all okay while getting actually more and more depressed. The only person I talked to about it was my sister Claudia, who was the oldest,
Mm.
who kind of she prompted me to talk about it. She said, "I
Oh,
know
that's
what
nice.
you're feeling. I know what you're going through. I'm here for you,"
Mm.
which was really very helpful. But even at that, I found it very, very difficult to say anything, to talk about it, to acknowledge what had happened to me. Um, and it was part of this maelstrom, and my father was furious and somehow blaming my mother, and my mother got to saying to me, "You just gotta come home, right after school, don't go anywhere." And so there was all these repercussions, and I felt like it was all my fault.
Yeah.
Bad enough something like that happens to you, but then you feel like it's all your fault. And so it was quite the time between Ellen's illness, my father's alcoholic tirades, and being assaulted. It was a lot. It was a lot to manage.
Yeah. So diary and beer, they both helped in some
Right,
way, even though it's not
exactly.
good.
No,
It's a coping thing. Well, and then you know, us women have go through this, I've had my own history of that kind of thing, and it doesn't go away. It just never goes away. And I had to learn that it's not your fault. And I almost feel like when you're young and you're going through it, like I felt like people knew, like a guy could look at you and know. And if, they hit on you or something, I'm like, what do you, there was a real, and then I did get into trouble again. And it wasn't, I was still really, really young and dumb, but it's, it should never have happened. So I started to feel like, oh, they all know. And like, I don't know. It was, and it's still weird when you look at it all and go, like, I almost feel like a predator knows a victim. Let's put it that way. And
It's
so
almost
I
like
had
your
to
shark
grow
can
past
smell
that.
blood.
Yeah. I had to grow up past that and be able to recognize a predator better and put off a screw you. You know? Does that
Unfortunately,
make sense? It's kind of a weird thing.
this story is as common as dirt with women.
Yeah.
I mean, it is so common. I think
Hmm.
most men would be shocked at how often we are targeted and victimized. I started to take karate lessons. It's not in the book. I'm a brown belt in Shaolin Kempo,
You
but
go,
I
girl.
began I began to take karate lessons and that made me feel better. That
Isn't
made
it?
me feel
Yeah,
a lot
I
better.
did self-defense, and I do know how to absolutely anybody. I know how to kill someone if I have to
There
from
you
different
go.
training. And it's like once you know that, and then you start to handle situations in life like fires. Like we've been through things, being robbed at gunpoint, and I actually chased the guy down who had me at gunpoint. So it's like kind of stupid stuff like that, but you get this. You have to take actual steps to make yourself feel stronger, like exactly what you
Right.
did with karate. And then you start to go, okay, I am not a victim, because, you're a victim of circumstance at some time, but it doesn't mean that your life is one big victim of circumstance.
And somebody at the time, it may have been Claudia, gave me the book by Maya Angelou, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And it was a
Oh,
wonderful book.
wow.
And she writes about her assault when she was about 7 or 8, very subtly in the book. But I read it and I thought something bad happened to her. And yet, look at her. She's an actress, she's a poet, she's a writer, she's gotten honorary degrees, she's on the bestseller list. I can grow up and do something. And when I was 30 as a journalist, I interviewed her and we ended up spending the afternoon together.
Oh my gosh.
And it was
Just drop these names,
well,
Mary
it was
Hawkins, Maya Angelou.
wonderful. It was wonderful. And she
Yeah.
was as deeply compassionate and kind and just such a deep person that I could sense in the book. And in my book, I drop a line in there saying I couldn't envision that future when I was in the middle of this mess. But it was a life-changing experience for me to be able to talk to her about these
Wow.
things and to tell her how much the book meant. And that was another way I could get healed, and anyone can by reaching out to wisdom figures and reading the books that they write.
Books are so personal.
Yes.
When you go to a movie, everyone starts talking about the movie. And of course, there's book clubs and people have conversations, which I think are fantastic. I think you should. I hope you do a book club or something, because
I
I
I
would
I
love
would
to.
I am open to any book club. I'll come in on Zoom. If you're in Connecticut where I'm at, I will come and bring bread. I love to bake bread.
Oh,
No
cool.
problem. And I've got a note at the end of my book saying, like if I'd be honored if people went to my Substack, Casey's Catch, or whatever. Call me, contact me through my website. I'll zoom in on your book club.
It's so cool because I think these are so many topics that women go through,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
men. And I mean,
Oh, sure.
I don't, we can't leave men out of the equation.
No,
That's why we
absolutely.
have our Women Making History channel. Men come on it all the time, but we have a bunch of others that are all men inclusive. So it's
Sure.
it's because if we don't work together, that's not a good balance, but
Absolutely.
women definitely have a lot to work through over the years, and some things are getting better, and then just when you think it's getting better, it gets worse in the world for women. So I think it's a constant struggle, and there's something it's so important when things are going wrong to have those Maya Angelou figures, those books that you're talking about,
Yes.
because we are allowed to. Strength doesn't mean we lose our kindness or our femininity, and that's something too that was difficult to grow into, because I mean we lived in Africa. It was a lot of craziness, and in the areas that we lived, and a lot of beauty, intense beauty, and amazing things. But that that lesson of compassion and strength go hand in hand, and you want the strength because then your compassion gets stronger.
Absolutely.
You
Absolutely.
know.
They're one is part of the other, or it should be.
Hmm. Yeah. Now, tell me about your typewriters behind you. I love
Oh,
typewriters.
well,
Oh man.
I tried to this is my 1925 Underwood. It was from a secretarial school in Chicago. I try to keep my typewriters to 12. It's a very cheap hobby. You can pick them up for, $25. This one is this was the same typewriter that Ernie Pyle used
Oh.
in World War II because it was the first portable typewriter.
Oh wow, how
You could
cool.
put it in a backpack. It works beautifully. This is manufactured
I
in
want one.
1915. And I just love these things. So, one of my,
I just, your fingers really, when we were all working on type, that's how I learned to type, was
oh
on the
yeah, me
road when I
too.
was 13. It was, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I had to do press releases for my mom's tour. And I'm like, okay. And then I was just getting so used, like annoyed with whiteout, or what do you call it? Whiteout here. We call it
Mhm.
Tipex. Then I was like, every time I'm like, oh no, that means because we were on the road full time. And I was doing these sponsor letters because she was doing her artwork for the Cancer Association as a fundraiser for all these years. And so I'd be doing these sponsor letters or press releases about the art openings and everything. And every time, and I'd have to lug the typewriter. That was my job. That was your
There
thing.
you go.
And I'd lug that typewriter. And then if the more I was like, I have to go to the car and get more paper. If I kept messing up, I'm like, you had to get better and better and better, because she would say, well, you're going to send out a letter about an art opening with whiteout on it.
Hmm. Wow, she was
That's not good.
exacting.
But she's right. I mean, you can't get people to spend a lot of money on artwork if you're
Right.
sending out, you know, those kinds.
Exactly.
So I got better and better, and that's how I learned. And then we went into computers, and that was hard it was like
Right.
playing the piano to an electric keyboard.
You don't have to pound on a computer like you do on a typewriter.
I do though,
Yeah.
sometimes. Like,
I,
exclamation.
I wear out keys.
Yeah, I do. I have to replace keyboards.
Hmm. Hmm.
Do you feel the same way about cell phones and not being able to hang up on people?
Oh, cell phones are really not phones, they're little computers. I mean, I
Yeah.
listen to audiobooks on my cell phone, and in fact, the Skyhorse Publishing is looking into an
Mm,
audiobook for my book,
awesome.
sending me samples of different narrators they have, which made me realize when I listened to some of these incredibly talented people, the difference between someone who just reads and a voice actor. I mean, I
Mm.
could read my own book the way these people read it. So that will be coming out in the near future. So I'm looking
Oh,
forward
that's
to that.
fantastic. That's exciting because so many people are listening to books,
Oh
and
yeah,
also for our blind community, anybody who's vision impaired, they
sure,
want to read it too. So
absolutely.
that's awesome. So, okay, Saving Ellen comes out April 1st, everyone. So go get it. You can pre-order it, go get it in the morning, or you might be listening to this on the 10th of April. It's out then. If it's
That's right. Absolutely. I'm very honored for anyone to read my book, anyone to join my Substack, Casey's Catch. I'm looking forward to getting to know all of you.
And are you still doing journalism and opinions pieces?
Well, I write opinion pieces every week in my own Substack. I work for foundations to help them write
Mm,
op-eds or press releases or whatever they need. I've had more than, well, really 40 years in daily newspaper journalism, so I don't really need to go there anymore, but it's something I can do almost by rote. So this
mm,
is my first book. I mean, I never wrote anything this long before, and it's been a real journey. In fact, I
mm.
began writing just about 5 years ago this month. So here
Wow.
we are, and it's in the world, and I'm couldn't be happier about that.
I love that it's coming out in spring because it's a season of renewal and rebirth, and it gives people some hope. Do you feel that in writing this? Because I know there's so many different reasons of writing, and then it's like, oh, I'm doing it. Do you want people to get hope through your book?
Absolutely. Whatever you're
Mm,
going through, no
mm,
matter how difficult, it is time limited. It will not last forever, and
that's
it
true.
will be okay. It will get better, and people who love you are waiting for you on the other side.
Mm,
In terms of my own relationship, which was very rocky with my father, we ultimately reconciled, and what helped was that he was deeply Catholic and he knew he screwed up and he owned that and he apologized. And he said, you know, I lose sleep because I know I wasn't a good father.
mm,
So it's easy to forgive somebody if they are that remorseful. A lot of
mm.
parents are not. They're defensive or they minimize the harm that they did. My father never did that.
That's
He
nice.
owned it. So at the end, there was reconciliation with him. And, you know, as a grandmother, I can see pieces of Ellen in my own granddaughter, Ellie, named after her, and how she
Wow.
runs around and she's loud and she's physical and she's strong and it feels like a lot of things have come full circle. So that's
Oh,
another,
that's beautiful. And
yeah,
and also in alcoholism in a family because it affects an entire family. Even if there's ones in the family who don't drink, it affects them too. Um, we do need to realize it's not forever either. I mean, it can be if someone does it until they die, right?
right.
But everyone can move forward, and there's forgiveness is a huge part of getting through all that, I
I
believe.
agree. Because not to do that is like, you know, having a glass of poison and drinking it and thinking it's going to make somebody else sick. But the other thing about, I was the first member of the family to stop drinking, and
Mm,
there's a very subtle power. I mean, I didn't preach, it was just something I was doing for myself. The power of example is very powerful. And seeing somebody, I stopped because there was a journalist that I admired who also stopped drinking, and I thought, I want what she's got. And
mm,
I stopped drinking, and my sister Ellen said, I want what you've got. And she
ah,
stopped drinking. And so what we have today, we have a lot of negative examples of people who are not compassionate and who are bullying and who are even
really?
terrorizing others, coming
Yep.
from our government, and which is very destructive because examples are really the most powerful thing we have in our lives right now. You can always be an example to others, even
Mm,
if you don't know you're being an example.
mm. When you said that about another journalist, my mind went right to Murphy Brown. I don't know why it did, but you remember that? I was like, it's
A
Murphy
blast
Brown.
from the past.
She did that too. She also stopped drinking, Murphy
Right.
Brown, in that story. So I love this. Thank you so much. It has been an amazing pleasure having you
Thank
on the
you.
show. And I can't wait to finish the book, but it's one of those where the humor, it's so real. You're right in it. It
Good.
reads like a movie, with
Good.
humor,
Thank
and you
you.
can go as fast or as slow as you want. You don't want to go back and go, huh, there's a nugget, you
Right.
know, there's nuggets throughout, and these are good nuggets. Yeah.
Well,
Sometimes,
The novelist Wally Lamb told me it read like a movie, so I was very
that's
complimented.
that's exactly it. That's it. That's exactly it. And it's not preachy.
Oh my God. No,
No,
I don't think I have a preachy bone in my body.
no,
Although
no.
my kids might disagree. I'll have to ask them.
But you're allowed to do that as a
That's
mom.
right.
Everyone, again, it's Saving Ellen by Maura Casey, and you can go to Casey Inc. INK, CaseyInc.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio. Keep up with our shows at bigblendradio.com.